Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is coming to theaters later this year, and it's got a lot of people talking about the original game, and more specifically how radically different the movie seems to be from it. We had gotten a taste of how different things would really be with the first film, with Mike Schmidt having seemingly nothing to do with William Afton's bloodline, among various other plot changes. For many, it seemed like the FNaF story, but streamlined. Based on the most recent trailer for FNaF 2, however, I think Blumhouse is playing things much more fast and loose this time, with bigger risks and a story very different from the game. For example, there doesn't seem to be a DCI in the movie, rather it was just Charlie's death. But then I thought, is that really different from FNaF 2? Today, I'm going to fully examine FNaF 2 with a new lens. A long time ago now, we thought we'd figured this game out, but in my opinion, with how much the series has changed and evolved, that might not be as true as we once thought. So walk with me as I recontextualize Five Nights at Freddy's 2. So when we begin FNaF 2, we circle a job listing in the newspaper, work our 5 nights, get a paycheck, and then an optional 6th night. However, in the past I pointed out that based on the story of FNaF 2, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Our main playable character for the first 5 nights is Jeremy Fitzgerald, but it's who we play as on the 6th night that doesn't make any sense, that being Fritz Smith. In the past, I pointed out how it doesn't make much sense for Fritz to be hired on after the building had shut down. However, that was before the release of the FNaF movie, where William does hire Mike to do just that. Night guard for the abandoned Freddy's, but it was also before the release of The Week Before, and this is a book that's actually going to be very useful when it comes to solving one of the most glaring inconsistencies in this entire game, that being when this game is meant to take place. And by that, I don't mean the year, because as pretty much everyone will agree with, the year this game takes place is 1987. I'm actually referring to the month. On night 1 of FNaF 2, the phone guy, Ralph, welcomes you to your new summer job at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. However, when we actually get our paycheck, we find out that it's dated for November. It begs the question, is this meant to take place during the summer months or November? And this is where The Week Before comes in. During The Week Before, we follow Ralph. Ralph is actually preparing to leave Freddy's and Fazbear Entertainment, but has to survive one more week against animatronics that suddenly seem very agitatable. But if you read through this book after collecting the cell phone, you get to do something very cool. You can follow Ralph's canonical path. Over the course of the 5 nights of this book, you can leave phone messages which the player then hears in FNaF 1 a week later. In fact, this route even explains why Ralph only leaves 4 messages, as he forgets to leave one on his night 4, and the one we hear in FNaF 1 is from his night 5. Why do I bring this up? Because it establishes something important. Ralph's messages are recorded a fair deal ahead of time. It's possible that the phone calls we hear in FNaF 2 were recorded the week before we play, or possibly even longer, and we're listening to them because they're the closest thing we get to training material, similarly to Mike watching the training tapes in the movie. So what I'm saying is that it makes more sense for Jeremy and Fritz to be working after the restaurant closes rather than before. The reason the place needs night guards at all is because the toys have yet to be scrapped. Now, is this what Scott intended when the game came out? Absolutely not, and what Scott intended on the game's release is definitely going to be a point of discussion throughout this video. Jeremy being switched to the day shift after night 5 means us playing as a different character on night 6 is possible. I have no doubt that's what Scott meant for us to think. However, if what I'm saying is true, it wouldn't be the first time a game has been recontextualized based on sequels or other pieces of the franchise. Hey, if this place was really open while we played, don't you think that spill on the floor would have eventually been cleaned up? Or Mangle would be arranged in different shapes every night as a take apart and put back together attraction? This might also explain why Fritz never receives a phone call. There isn't any reason for him to get one. The business is for the most part shut down, and unlike Jeremy, he didn't think to listen to the pre-recorded messages. The only thing that really tells me this may be wrong is that on the same screen Jeremy gets his paycheck, we also see a newspaper for the restaurant shutting down. Now, in my opinion, because this newspaper is presented to us absent of context, it does not have to be interpreted as if the newspaper is from the same day. It could just be there to fill us, the player, in on what happened after the phone messages. This theoretical order of events would likely mean Jeremy is not the victim of the bite of 87 as well, which a lot of people seem to agree he is, so take that as you will. Of course, there's also the possibility that the calls from nights 1 through 4 are pre-recorded messages, and night 5's is an actual phone call, but that's pretty unlikely in my opinion, and simply an option I propose to somehow paint Jeremy as the bite victim despite the time frame difference. Now we move on to the meat of this video, the real bomb I planned on dropping, that being that the 5 children who would be killed here, yeah, that never happened. You see, for many years now, it's been accepted that in addition to the 5 kids William Afton killed that make up the original missing children incident, there was a second set of 5 killed at this location as well. How we got to this solution is a complicated one, and it's one I'll do my best to explain so that when I explain why I think it's false, you understand why. When FNaF 2 came out just a few short months after FNaF 1, there was a brief period of time where everyone playing thought one thing: this is a sequel to the first game. However, it ended up being a prequel, which greatly altered how we viewed the story. Over the course of FNaF 2, Ralph tells us about an incident that may or may not have happened at the restaurant, with an investigation ongoing and rumors being spread. He eventually spills the beans on us that someone wore a yellow suit and used it, and now none of the animatronics were acting right. Again, I think this further proves that we're listening to these tapes further in the future than when they were recorded, as from night 1 the animatronics aren't behaving right. Anyway, we aren't told what really happened, but Ralph apparently knows something. Beyond that, we also get a set of death minigames. So retro style minigames wherein we take control of an animatronic and see some part of the story. The 4 death minigames of FNaF 2 are Give Gifts, Give Life, Take Cake to the Children, Foxy Go Go Go, and Save Them. Across 3 of these minigames, we seem to be seeing similar stories. In Take Cake, you give cake to crying children while another is upset outside. Eventually, a man in a purple car shows up, kills the child, and drives off, ending in a puppet jump scare. In Foxy Go Go Go, you run into a room 3 times to surprise a group of children. However, on the 3rd time, a purple man watches while smiling, and when you enter, all of the kids are dead. It ends with a Foxy jump scare. In Save Them, you play as Withered Freddy, and the puppet leads you throughout the restaurant, urging you to save them. There are 5 dead kids littering the place with pools of blood. Very rarely, a purple man sprite will appear, and being touched by him will instantly end the minigame. The last minigame is Give Gifts, Give Life, and is the only one of the 4 to not feature the purple man at all. In this minigame, you, as the puppet, put animatronic heads on 4 dead bodies. In the last frame before a Golden Freddy jump scare, a 5th body appears in the center, and that's it for the minigames. But one of these, in specific, Save Them, seemed to tell us something. 5 kids were murdered here, and the purple man did it. Now, when FNaF 2 came out, I would 100% have argued that this was the missing children incident. However, we've had many game, book, and even movie releases since then. Nowadays, it's fairly agreed upon that the missing children incident happened in 1985. This is the established year for stories like Into the Pit and the game adaptation of that book. It also lines up with the idea that it was the original animatronics that Afton stuffed the bodies into, since we know based on Help Wanted that Freddy's was established in 1983. Because of this, people switched up on what this event was actually meant to be, and started referring to it as the Dead Children incident. The contrast being that because these bodies were just scattered among the restaurant, unlike the original MCI, it wouldn't be a mystery what happened to them, especially since Ralph seems 100% certain someone died by the time of night 5. So, case closed. FNaF 2 is about another set of victims from William, but that never really sat well with me, and I don't think it sat well with FNaF fans either. And it's primarily because outside of FNaF 2, it's never really mentioned. FNaF 3 only shows us the scrap toy parts and Phantom Mangle, Phantom Balloon Boy, and Phantom Puppet. If anything, those 3 alongside the Shadow animatronics would be the only characters from FNaF 2 to ever appear again in a main continuity FNaF game. Unless you count their appearances in UCN, AR, and the Help Wanted games, which I don't really. But beyond even the characters themselves, the DCI kids are just never mentioned again. The grave ending of FNaF 6 only accounts for the victims of the MCI, and presumably Charlotte. And something similar happens in Help Wanted 2 with the player only collecting the 5 kids and Charlotte. It's as if this second set of 5 kids never happened. Did Scott forget them? Well, while that's possible, I kind of doubt it. I think it's more likely that somewhere along the line, we messed up. And this is why I don't think the DCI is what happened. But then, how do I explain Save Them? Well, with the power of recontextualization, this minigame is actually really easy to solve. But in order to decipher what this minigame means, if not the DCI, we need to establish a through line. What connects every one of these minigames? It's not Purple Guy, he only appears in 3 of the 4. It's not the Puppet, they also only appear in 3 of the 4. But what all these games have in common is perspective. All of them are played from the perspective of an animatronic. And why is this important? Well, over the years we've had bits and pieces of the animatronic perspective fed to us, and by that I mean the perspective of ghosts. The Silver Eyes trilogy is probably the first big case of us having any idea what it's like being a ghost in the FNaF universe. According to Afton, the dead are wont to forget. The animatronics, though conscious and alive, don't really remember who they are and might not even recognize that they're dead. In fact, let's look at the week before again for more context on this. In this book, you can encounter Chica in the kitchen. By setting up a cake for her, you can sing happy birthday to her, which kind of stuns and transfixes her. However, if you say happy birthday, Susie, Chica freaks out and smashes the cake in grief. The way I see it, the implication is that the dead aren't fully aware. They don't remember who they are or what happened to them, but reminding them oftentimes upsets them and confuses them. All this to say that when we're seeing through the eyes of an animatronic, we can't fully trust what we're seeing because their vision is inherently flawed and painted with their own delusions and forgotten memories. Now, let's look at the minigames themselves, more specifically, how they don't really seem to line up. Give gifts, give life is probably the most obvious to me. In this minigame, not only do we see a magically spawning fifth child, but we also see the puppet put masks on the 5 dead kids, something that shouldn't really be possible since they would have already been stuffed in the animatronics by Afton. Then, in the case of Foxy Go Go Go, Foxy has bare endo legs, which would definitely be a strange design choice outside of it making him look more recognizably like Foxy. So using the same logic that things aren't 100% as they seem, can we trust Save Them? I don't really think so. My interpretation of Save Them is that Freddy is being reminded of how he can't change the past. He doesn't recognize any of the dead bodies, which is why they're all gray, ghostly shapes. He doesn't recognize that he's dead. And the reason the minigame always ends when we touch a body, or when Afton gets to us, is because in both scenarios, we're suddenly confronted with the truth. We can't save them. They're already gone. The same type of truth that freaks Chica out in the week before. Freddy sees one of these kids as someone he recognizes, maybe even himself. The illusion is shattered, and that's why the minigame ends. In Foxy Go Go Go, the same thing pretty much happens, with Foxy being confronted by 5 dead kids and not knowing how to process it outside of rage. So what are these minigames? Distorted memories, delusions, and dreams. Nothing that happens in these minigames can be fully trusted. They just have a feeling to them that these animatronics recognize as themselves. The kid who frowns in Foxy Go Go Go, that one's likely meant to represent Foxy himself, or rather Fritz. Fritz knows what's about to happen, and Foxy doesn't. Save Them did still happen, but what we're seeing is not true to reality. It's true to Withered Freddy's reality. But wait, if the DCI didn't happen, what did? We know something had to happen, but if not the DCI, what does that even leave? Well, in order to find out, we need to listen back to the phone calls. One call in particular, Ralph mentions that people are spreading rumors about Freddy's, trying to make a quick buck off of it, you know. He also assures that whatever is happening out there is not connected to Freddy's at all. Out there. If he were talking about deaths happening within the restaurant, I don't think he'd even be able to say this. It's not out there if it's in here, you know? So maybe it's not that, but someone dying outside of Freddy's, and it somehow gets connected back to Freddy's. Now, if you ask me, this could apply to several things. For starters, and probably most unsatisfyingly to me, this could mean Afton was killing other people elsewhere, just wearing the Spring Bonnie outfit. But that doesn't make much sense to me. Instead, I think it's possible he's referring to the death of Charlotte Emily, the little girl who would then haunt the puppet. Now, I know a lot of people are not going to like me saying that, especially since Charlie is a pretty popular pick for Afton's first kill. It's even listed on one singular shirt on Amazon. Well, anyways, I think this fits the most anyway. Charlie did die outside of Freddy's, and later on, Pizza Sim would even establish that the puppet short-circuited on top of her. A pretty good connection to Freddy's, but one which Ralph could desperately deny. Then there's the FNaF 2 movie trailer. I don't want to quickly use this movie as evidence of anything being canon or not, but it's super interesting to me how they tell us straight up, a little girl died here. Not 5 kids, 1 little girl. And given previous words by Jason Blum, the first movie tried to follow the first game, and they would try to do the same for the second. But what about the toys? It's been up in the air whether they're possessed or just faulty code. In my opinion, the toys are possessed, but if the DCI didn't happen, who are they possessed by? The MCI. My current theory, and the one that fits with the DCI, is that because they were using parts from the original animatronics to fix the toys inadvertently became possessed by the same spirits. Remnant in the FNaF series is a combination of metal and a spirit. So would it not be possible for this haunted metal to animate another animatronic? That's kind of the premise of the 4th closet, really. So no, I don't believe that the toys are haunted by the DCI. But does this work in the whole timeline? What about Henry's wound first inflicted on him? If Charlotte dies in 1987, that would not be the first wound. Well, to be honest, I don't have a solid answer for that. It could mean almost anything. Like, for example, Henry is the first person who William took control of. similar to how he did Edwin, putting both of these men under his thumb and making them unknowingly create murder machines for him. Or it could mean that in the game timeline, William actually did kill Sammy, and that was his first victim, and Charlie just ended up being killed later. There's ways around it, and I think that specific line from Henry is still too vague to debunk this theory. In any case, even if I'm wrong about Charlie being the death that took place here, I'm still pretty confident that the DCIs simply didn't happen. You can feel free to disagree, but I think this would better explain why these kids are never mentioned again than they were scrapped. Because you know how many times the MCI kids got scrapped? Hell, there's debate about whether or not they're still around despite looking like this. The point of this video is not necessarily to prove that the DCI didn't happen. In fact, I'm willing to bet a ton of people are just gonna screenshot the thumbnail without watching the video and post it to Reddit or Twitter with some caption like FNaF fans are media illiterate SMH. But what I do want to prove here is that just because a theory is widely accepted doesn't mean that there aren't any alternatives. I think this theory would alone explain why Scott never brings up this set of kids again, why all the focus is solely on the MCI kids and Charlotte. Furthermore, I hope that through watching this video, you learn to question things. For example, why do so many people agree that FNaF 1 takes place in 1993? That stems from a game theory video. A game theory video where he uses a real-life tragedy as evidence for his horror game theory. Why do so many people think the survival logbook is Mike, Cassidy, and Crying Child? Well, they're popular theories. So it's always a good idea to look at it for yourself and you decide what you're really looking at. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to subscribe. I'm Demuted. Peace.